Right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. Hopefully, I will be worth the wait, you know. And I will be talking about my experience with being a GDR scholar here at ASU and how it connected to the PAC program. And so, before I get started, this is kind of a different presentation for me, right? The presentations I normally do are based on the knowledge that I can bring to you, and in this instance, what Jesus has asked me to do is bring my experience. So I'm gonna bring my experience to you all about going to South Africa and learning about the female condom, all right? Can I get 5 volunteers real quick? You don't have to do anything, I just need you to remember numbers. Okay, all right. 1, 3, 5, 10, 16, 17. Thank you. All right, so there once was a poor black boy from St. Louis. He looked around the world and said, oh my gosh, there is so much inequality around here. And then he said, you know what? I am going to change the world. One of the things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that my mother and my sister and my grandmother get equal pay, get equal opportunity, and are never, ever sexually harassed. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to every single place that endorses that type of idea, and I'm gonna get them to change their minds. We're gonna build a partnership, and then we're gonna have peace and justice in the world. So, who has 1? 1, no poverty. Sustainable Development Goal 1. Who has 3? Good health and well-being. Who has 5? Gender equity. Who has 10? Reduced inequality. Who has 16? Peace and justice, strong institutions. And who has 17? Partnerships to achieve these goals. So there are 17 sustainable development goals, and I'm just taking you through the 5 that fueled my story to South Africa. Now, how many of you have actually seen a female condom besides right now? Okay, I got 2, right? So when I first gave my presentation at the GDR Scholars, I actually did a female condom demonstration in which I took this 7-inch piece of polyurethane and inserted it into a vaginal simulator. I showed how it went into the vagina and how it hit the cervix in order to plant itself. Little did I know from that instance would I then fly across the world to understand how this particular device actually represented macro level practice. Now, when you think of a female condom, when you think of any condom, usually it's very individualistic, right? It's like, I'm thinking about this on an individualistic ideal scale. However, what this particular object actually represents is female empowerment, international policy development. What this actually represents is the U.S. foreign aid to different countries because it is mostly supplied by USAID and PEPFAR. So to understand how we go from research to practice, I got to apply for the GDR scholarship and was awarded. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. If anybody ever gets the opportunity to go to Durban, South Africa, completely for free, and someone actually pays you to do it, I highly suggest you do it. Little plug for the Global Development Scholars program. However, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that the application process was as easy as filling out an application, submitting a resume, a letter of intent. I had to get a letter of recommendation from one of my professors. And then the hard part was getting a host institution to actually sponsor me. Doesn't sound too hard, but then when you are not in the country that you are supposed to, that you're going to, it can be a little bit difficult, especially if that country is 9 hours ahead of your time zone, especially if you are so used to working in a particular type of frame. I can now call myself a social worker, right? And so I am very used to social work being this presentation, theory, method, there you go. I got there, and the first thing that I did was poster presentations. Oh, yay! I thought. But what it did was, it centered and grounded me in the information that I needed to learn, the process that I had to do, and then get me to be a better social worker, because I now understood that the poster presentations were just the beginning. They were just the beginning. And so I got to learn about the different primary data that was collected. I got to learn about the systems of the South African female condom distribution program and what they found, what the deficits were, how many other national sponsored female condom programs there were around the world. Does anybody know? Anybody know how many there are? 4. There are 4. And one is not in the United States. And so what I was able to do was move from those poster presentations to utilizing other skills that I learned, such as theory, such as agenda setting, and understanding that I now got to set my own research agenda. So I looked at those other 4 female condom distribution programs. I looked at the Sustainable Development Goals. I wrote a documentary script which actually kind of outlined what I would ask each one of those programs. And then I said, well, what would get this to move forward? And someone said, you gotta focus on the structures, the systems, and the donors. Oh, well, shoot, that's my jam all day, right? Because that is what I went to school for. Understanding that if I focus on the donors, I know where the money comes from. If I focus on the international policy, I know who the players are. If I focus on the systems, I understand that, guess what? The doctors need to be trained on female condoms so that they get used more, so that international policy can't say, oh, they're not being used, so therefore nobody wants them, and therefore nobody is going to actually utilize them. One of the things that the female condom does is that it empowers women to be autonomous beings and not rely on their male or insertive partner to actually do protection. So they don't have to say put on a condom, because they can put on a condom. And then they can move forward with their lives. So it increases their negotiation and reduces their risk of sexual violence. I did not know that I would go from inserting this device into a plastic container, flying halfway across the world, and learning about international legislation, about systems of health, and then also how it then connected to the work that I would eventually do here. So now, I am the Sexual Violence Prevention Coordinator for the state of Arizona through the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. Right? Not only a lot to say, but heavy. And what I learned in South Africa through the GER Scholars Program was not only how to take research to practice, but also how to take advocacy and activism and put it into a box that was advocacy and activism that wasn't just in a box. It exceeded the box. And I now get to look at, okay, so how do we get a rape crisis center here in Arizona? Because we don't have one. How do I increase prevention efforts here in Arizona? How do we focus on vulnerable populations and turn individual interactions into preventable disparities? And so what I now do is I get to launch initiatives that focus on men and male-identified individuals. I get to do strategic planning and prevention work around sexual violence. I also get to talk about the female condom and what that means in the structures and the policies that we put forth in sexual and domestic violence. I also get to train people on patriarchy, systems, theories of change, all of those different things. And so I learned in the PAC program a myriad of things. Got to apply them in South Africa, and then I got to fly back here and someone pays me to do what I actually went to school to do. It is amazing that this little black boy who grew up poor, who looked around and saw inequality in gender, in race, in all of those things from his mother and his sister and his grandmother, gets to actually step into a role where there can be equity, partnership, and eventually equality in the world. Thank you.